Okay, everyone, with respect for everyone's time, I think we're going to get started. So thank you very much for attending Print Audit's presentation today on unified billing in the age of diversification. I'm Wes McDonald. I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Marketing here at Print Audit. And most of you I probably know from different trade shows or doing business together over the years. And for others who I have not met, certainly look forward to meeting you virtually today. And the next event that I'll be at, I'll actually be at the BTA show in Las Vegas in August. So for those that are going there, certainly look forward to seeing you. First thing I want to do is just a little housekeeping. We've all seen those videos online where they have the hilarious conference call videos with the people sitting in the boardroom, so we don't want to do that. Make sure that you do mute for the presentation. We'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation, and you can either jot them down through the questions pane, which exists in this presentation today, or jot them down as notes for an open discussion towards the end of the presentation. If you do have any trouble, sometimes we do have people that have trouble with audio, etc. Please just message through the messaging window, and we'll make sure that we get you sorted out. So some of the stuff they're going to look at today, first of all, why unified billing? And as we talk about why unified billing, we'll also talk about what it actually is. And we'll look at the simplification of the sales rep compensation plans, which is a key benefit of moving towards unified billing. Also, simplifying customers' buying decision. Sometimes when we have too many options in how customers buy things from us, it can make the whole buying experience much more complicated. And unified billing in the back office. So we'll look at considerations. If we're changing how we bill customers, then it's probably going to change some of the ways that we actually integrate that with our back office. And of course, most importantly, building a unified billing price. In the case that we're going to use for an example, it's seat-based billing. Of course, there are other methods to be able to do this as well. And then we'll look at conclusions and next steps moving towards unified billing and the question and answer period towards the end. Now, one of the things that we all know, I won't spend a lot of time on this because I think we're either experiencing it or we've seen it in other presentations, and we've seen it from industry groups like Fotizo and like InfoTrends and others, that we're certainly experiencing increased market pressure, and that's affecting margin. And one of the things that we see with margin is that because the customer is starting to understand sort of the buying process with cost per page, that it's become very real. And most people on the call have probably had some personal experience with that. The other thing, obviously, is the increased competition for pages. What we've seen in the statistics in the marketplace is that pages are either flatline or in a slight decline. And of course, people argue back and forth on whether that's 1%, 2%, 3%, or 4%, which I really think is immaterial. The point is it is flat or declining. So there's a lot of competition for those pages that are going to remain. And obviously declining pages. I have talks with customers every single day through the assessment process. They're actually looking, aggressively looking for ways to further reduce their, their pages more proactively. So what are some of the reasons? Well, millennials are really starting to have an impact in the office place. I can remember being at events 5 or 6 years ago when we were starting to talk about millennials entering the workforce. Well, they have long since entered the workforce, and the door is wide open, and many of them are actually starting to get into positions where they have decision-making power. So that's become a strong reality for us. The truth about millennials, any way you shake it, is that they print by far and above fewer pages than those in the older demographic. I have a 13-year-old, actually, let me correct that, I now have a 14-year-old who doesn't print anything. The only time he prints is when he's required to for a school form or something else that has to be done. And even in his classrooms now, they use Google Docs for absolutely everything. So all of his homework is submitted online. They collaborate with other students on different projects that they're working on together. So that's that's changing very quickly. The other thing is screen-based technologies. Obviously, things like iPads and Android devices and other smartphones. And of course now smartwatches and virtual reality. So we have a person in our office who is quite enamored with some of this virtual reality technology and actually uses it for looking at work screens. And it's quite incredible to think that people are starting to find more ways than ever to actually be able to view and process information. The other big one is workflow software. So software changes everything. And we are really starting to see a lot of software now, and I would say such as print audits as well, that is actually designed to reduce print waste and to start streamlining document workflows, so that any paper-based process is either using paper in some part of the stream because of regulation or compliance, or, and this is the case in many situations, simply because it's an antiquated way of doing it. And there's probably 1,000 examples that you experience in your everyday life. One of the most obvious ones for me was the first time that I actually signed a digital pad for a FedEx package, which was delivered to my house. And speaking with the FedEx delivery guy, he said that their whole process has removed probably 70% of the paper in their in their fulfillment strategies. So there's a lot of that stuff going on in the marketplace, and customers are continuing to look at it. The other thing, as we said earlier, obviously flat overall economic growth on those existing pages. And this is probably an important one to pay attention to, that as you look at the marketplace, pages themselves are flat or declining. That being said, volumes for managed print are still in a steady increase, still in a strong growth curve. So that means that the customers and the dealerships themselves are becoming much more sophisticated in how they actually go after those additional pages. One of the things that changes now, obviously, as we start offering software solutions and as we start offering other things, is that we bill for them traditionally in different ways. And this is something we need to talk about pretty importantly, because our customers notice it in their buying cycle. I've been doing assessments for the last 6 years, actually physically doing end user assessments, and I ask a lot of questions when I'm doing these assessments. And one of the responses that often comes back from customers is, why do they have 3 different ways for me to buy things? So for their managed print program, I have cost per page, and when they're selling me equipment, it's either as a one-time item or through a separate lease. And if I want any other additional services like document management software, etc., that they're selling that to me as well, and then charging some kind of maintenance fee every year. So I've got all these different kind of buying decisions to make. And to make things more complicated, many dealers, I'm sure there's some on the line today, are starting to offer managed services and managed IT services as part of the diversification strategy, moving forward to deal with these flat or declining pages, right? So as we start to increase our portfolio, it's really important also that we look at what is the best way to bill for everything for a customer, so that we have less things for them to think about in that buying decision, right? There are many ways to do unified billing. I've heard of companies that actually do it per printer or per MFD. So what they'll do is they'll charge a flat monthly fee for that device and have unlimited printing included with that device level sort of rental or printer-based seat, if you will. The billing mechanism of choice, however, in the IT world, because they're so used to dealing with much more diverse platforms of equipment, if it's servers and switches and desktop computers and other things, is that they have moved to a per seat or per user way of billing. And the reason being that it's just simpler for them to start adding different offerings to that seat price and not having to complicate things, just building addendums to be able to add many different things. We haven't had as much experience in the printing world with sort of the diversity of things that a managed IT provider takes care of an environment, but that's obviously very quickly changing. Some of the benefits we want to do now is look at, if we are going to look at some form of unified billing, what are the benefits? Probably the biggest one, and we've had a hard time with this in the managed print world, probably the biggest one is some kind of alignment with our customers. So the trick is with managed print is that we've made the promise of being able to simplify things for the customer, to help them save money and to be able to allocate resources to more important things than print. But what happens is once we do get them signed up to a managed print program, the customer says, that's great, I'm signed up now. I can see the benefits of going cost per page, and I can also see that if I print less of these pages or print less color, etc., that I can save more money. So, how are you going to help me out? And typically that leads to crickets. And I've spoken with many dealers who say, well, that's not true in our case. We do the right thing for the customer. We don't worry about it. But at the end of the day, we are all in this business to make money, to be profitable, and there is certainly a misalignment right now. We want them printing more pages. We want them printing more color pages because those obviously have higher margins and a much stronger revenue curve for us. and the customer wants to print less. They want to find out where some of their workflows are broken, and they want to make sure that if there are areas of unnecessary cost that they are cutting those out if it doesn't impact their workflow too much. So we've got that misalignment right now. And that's one thing unified billing can really help us with. And I won't explain exactly how it helps on this slide, but we'll certainly get to that as we move through the presentation. So in order to be a true win-win, if we're going to do something for the customer, the reality is today that under cost per page is that if we have any page reductions, that there are revenue losses. And certainly I've seen typically that when we incorporate print governance policies for customers, that there can be an overall reduction of 20% or higher of the amount of revenue that's being generated because the customers are actually benefiting from good print governance policies. So that's not a true win-win for us and our customers. But the thing is, if we actually add the solution revenue, and for those that are on the call that actually do offer other kinds of solutions, and for some of those that do offer our solutions, that the solution revenue is much higher margins and allows you to play around with how you actually build profitability within those accounts, right? So the trick is, if you do incorporate some kind of unified billing platform like seat-based billing, that you can actually reduce a customer's typical spend with you by about 20%, while at the same time increase the total amount of gross profit in that account by 3 to 6%. And I want to be clear on that. I'm not talking about the percent gross profit in the deal, because that still doesn't mean you're going to make more money. It is total gross profit in that account. So even though the customer is giving you 20% less revenue, you have the ability to make 3 to 6% more GP, total GP in that account, than you're making today. And I would call that a win-win. Customer saves money, and we actually either get to stabilize or increase the amount of money that we're making in gross profit. And again, I don't think anyone that's on the call today is here as a charity. We all like to do the right things, but when we find a way to do the right thing and still be able to actually protect the revenue and the profit that we're making, that we're much happier, right? One of the things that we need is a new definition, and if anyone belongs to the MPSA, they're a fantastic organization, and they've done a really good job of kind of modernizing what managed print means. That, well, instead of reinventing the wheel, I think all we really need to do is sort of borrow from that and have a look at it, in the age of adding other things than just printers. So in this particular definition, we've said that seat-based billing, or SBB for short, is managed print offered at a flat fee, which is billed per end user per month and covers the support for all print-enabled devices used by each end user. This may entail supporting locally connected printers, desktop printers, multifunction devices, scanners, fax machines, and all related consumables, services, parts, and software. And that's really important, is to say that there's a lot of other things that we can add to this seat-based billing price. And I would further add that you can sort of think of, well, it's not just scanners and fax machines and consumables for printers. Start thinking broader, start looking at other elements in their office, such as their desktops, such as any servers that they have, switches, etc. So let's talk a little bit about compensation. In the 15 years that I've been in managed print, probably the #1 topic at any dealership I'm working with when I'm consulting with them is better ways to compensate the sales reps. And we have a bit of a problem with sales reps, especially when they're coin operated, and they should be coin operated because their job is to obviously drive more revenue for us. But the trick is they're going to go after the biggest part of whatever they're going to actually get paid on, the biggest pile of coins, and typically that is on the new hardware sale. We've always been reticent on the cost per page side to make sure that we do compensate reps for any ongoing contract revenue, because at the end of the day we don't know how much of that is actually going to exist. Sometimes, obviously, with cost per page is that we don't pay for it at all, or if we do, that it's a very nominal amount. And if we pay that all up front for either a year's worth of the contract value, or if we give the actual sales rep an annuity base, which they get to appreciate every month, it's been very difficult to to get that off the ground. And obviously, as a dealership, that's very important for us. When we have a line item which has no guarantee, if we don't have page minimums and other things in place, it's very difficult, to safely pay a rep for, adding those on. Adding solutions is another big one. So sometimes a one-time hit for the sales rep based on that software, and it's generally not as exciting as the piece that they get for the hardware. So once again, the sales rep does what they're paid to do, and if that means that they're making more money on the new hardware, then that's exactly what they're going to do. And it's not their fault and it's not our fault based on the the current model, but there certainly are better ways to to do it, right? And so I'd certainly be interested to hear any points or questions from anyone that's on the call as we move through this on how they're compensating for cost per page today and how that's been going, what kind of modifications or changes that they've actually had to make in the program to make it successful as they start adding all of these different layers and elements to their programs. One thing I like about unified billing or seat-based billing is that it's very simple to actually pay on it. Now, one of the benefits from a customer perspective with seat-based billing is that they get guaranteed savings up front. So traditionally, whenever we put a solution in place, we talk to customers about it could save you this much money, it could save you that much money. And could is a very terrible word, we're trying to talk to customers about ROI. Because they take our could and they do their own math on it, either divide it by half or quarter it, or whatever to say, what if we don't actually experience any cost savings benefit from this? But under a seat-based price, they'll see those savings on day one. And that's really important, obviously, as a dealership, because what it also means is that you've got a fixed monthly amount which you can now compensate your sales reps on. Okay, so if you choose to do that, for a year up front, or if you elect to give them a annuity base in which they get to experience sort of growing their base through annuity throughout the year, those are two separate conversations, but both of them are very applicable, right? And I've worked with dealerships that do both, some that are just paying on the first year upfront as a one-time hit, others that are helping their reps to build an annuity base. So we can certainly talk about that anytime that you want to as well. But the key is for you as a dealership that you have an exact amount of money that is coming in every month that you can start to compensate on, right? It also gives the reps an incentive now to start selling additional services by what I like to call layering the seat. So in a typical sale, once the contract is sold, they're going to have to look for another new contract to be able to get paid on. But under a seat-based program or unified billing platform, the rep can continually start to add new elements to that seat price in which they can actually buffer what they're getting paid, right? Either up front or as they start to do their quarterly reviews with their customers. So they'll have much more incentive to actually layer the seat because it's not a completely brand new sales cycle they have to move through as much as it is convincing the customer, to sign an addendum for the contract that they already have in place. So from a sales perspective, the reps will certainly find it much, easier, and they'll be much more motivated to, to try and layer those seats. Now, the other thing aside from sales reps compensation, before we can pay them, we've actually got to get customers to buy things from us. And again, as I talked about earlier in the presentation, that the buying decision for most customers, for any of those on the call that actually do assessments in their selling process, that customers do complain about the complexity in the buying decision, that they have different decisions they have to make on different elements because different people have to be involved simply because of the way that it's billed. So we've all had customers that have, if a one-time buying decision is over X number of dollars, then that has to get approved, and it has to get to, approved through, whatever group of people they have doing it. Same goes for contracts, leases, etc. You start to bring other people, into the buying decision. And one of the nice things about a unified billing platform, as we start to think about it, however we decide to do it, is that a unified platform allows us to have many, many elements in one decision. So it's good because we still have a lot of mystery on how that one decision is made, but as far as being able to pull the pin, being able to make the decision, it's much simpler for, the customer. And again, they don't have to believe us on promised savings because under a seat-based price, under a unified billing price of some kind, the customer knows exactly what they're going to pay every month. It's 100% budgetable. And as you're working with IT groups and CIOs, that it's important for them to be able to budget for, this area of their office. But most providers don't give them the ability to do that, not 100%. And so a seat-based price allows them, to do that. The other thing is that most customers, when they're even under a cost per page contract, the billing administration for them after the fact is a real pain. So that they do try and obviously keep us honest, and that means they audit whatever we tell them that they've printed, and they come up with numbers that they either agree with or disagree, and that's always a problem. There's nothing worse than having to go back and actually work with a customer in a negative fashion to try them to get us to pay more because we got the the meters wrong, or the customer coming back to us to try and get a credit because we didn't get those counts right either, right? So once it's a flat rate seat-based price, all of that goes away. The other thing we have to be aware of is that cost per page and managed print services is no longer anything new, as much as we'd like to think that it's new. Customers are starting to be a lot more savvy on how they do price comparisons. And, of course we can say, well, the reason our competitor is cheaper is because they're using inferior product, the service is nothing like ours, and, the experience is much better with us. But they're hearing that from a lot of different people. So it's very easy for them to price shop and do comparisons, even if they're not comparing all of the correct elements, they're doing so anyway. So if a customer is having a bad day under a traditional, cost per page program, and you've sold them some kind of, print management solution, like an embedded solution or secure release or something else, the only consideration they have to think about staying with us or leaving us is based on that, cost per page. And a unified billing platform is going to help us to make sure there's enough elements in there, to be able to make their decision to leave us that much more, complicated. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the things for a customer which is really exciting in a model like this is that they experience their savings right away. So whenever we talk about ROI or whenever we talk about any sort of positive impact they're going to have from a solution, typically it's somewhere out there. So it's either 9 months away or 12 months away, and if we're really good at selling it, then maybe it's 14 to 20 months out, right? And I say really good at selling it because most customers, don't want to make a decision in which they don't see ROI in the, the first 9 to 12 months. So the beauty of this is when we're, selling the solution is that that one price gives them everything they're looking for, and because it is a fixed monthly fee that they experience those savings, from the day that they start using us for those services. Billing administration obviously gets a lot easier for them, so they can start dedicating time and doing other things than making sure that the cost per page copies are actually, what we say they are. And the customer can now budget for print, and this is a big one. I didn't think it would be that big a deal, but any end user that I speak with, either in IT or in other areas, that the ability to have 100% budgetability for print is really important for them because it's just one thing, again, that they don't have to worry about. They can report that through to their administration, and they can meet their targets, without having to measure it on a monthly or quarterly basis to, to see that it's having impact, right? And obviously, if there's any new services that had to be added, it's much easier that we can actually just work with the customer with an addendum so that we're not constantly filling out, new contracts which actually have to be signed. So when we start looking at the back office, hopefully somebody on the call can actually share some notes with me either privately or at the end of the call to talk about how they do it today. And I'm well aware of some of the tools that we use and some of the ERPs and other things to make sure that we can do this, effectively. But any way you shake it, that in order to be able to bill on a monthly basis for a cost per page program, we've have to gather the meters remotely. And there's probably not anyone on this call anymore that doesn't use some kind of tool to be able to gather those meters. The big bugaboo that always comes up is local devices, and I've seen more calisthenics and strange ways to bill for locally connected printers than I could have ever imagined before getting into this business, right? And so some people bill for local printers on a a fixed monthly rate. Some people actually do a true up once a quarter in which they'll go in and manually grab the meters from the devices and then sort of adjust the bill accordingly. Some ignore them altogether, and I know for a fact that some are actually providing toner for those devices, not getting paid for them at all. So there's many different problems with local devices. True ups and minimums. Minimums is probably one of the most interesting concepts that I've seen in the managed print services world. And in which we charge customers for a minimum set of pages to make sure that we're covering other assets. For example, if we give them new printers or other leased devices, etc., to make sure we're covering that. It's also become a very neat way to get more pages out of the customer than they actually generate, and that I've seen that in many occasions. I met a customer once who said that they were actually getting their pages for 0.2 of a cent monochrome, and upon further investigation, they were actually paying closer to 3 cents a page based on the minimums they were actually paying for versus what they were actually printing, right? So it does have its upsides and downsides depending on how they're delivered. And for any additional service items, obviously that as we integrate that into the ERP, making sure that we track that effectively, changes as well, right? So our ERP and the way that we make sure that we're dealing with the customer account is further complicated in the way that we're billing them. And oh, by the way, that is billing in arrears, right? So the customer spends our money first, and then we try and collect that. So we let them know at the end of the month. Maybe it takes us a week to generate what they actually owe us based on the meters that we get, and it's certainly not going to be any sooner than 30 days before we get paid for the money we already spent to provide that service, and in most cases it's 60 to 90 days. So we've already delivered the service, we've given them the goods, and it takes a while for us to get those dollars, right? One of the really cool things about using some kind of unified billing platform with your back office is that you can actually start billing up front for it, okay? And that's really important, because when you're billing up front, that means that just like any other services-based thing, if you can think of them like Netflix or or other things that you're doing, that you pay before you enjoy the services. And this is a way that customers are quite happy to pay for things. So if there is a better way, and I think unified billing is, I'm certainly a convert, is that meter collection itself now and the user document data is used for profitability checking, not for billing. And that's not really splitting hairs. I mean, it's really important to understand that we can spend as much time internally as we want doing our profitability checking, making sure that we're getting paid the way that we should, but we shouldn't think that the customer has to do that as well, right? That's not where the partnership comes in. That the simpler we can bill a customer for the services that we deliver, and the more budgetable it is, the better it is for them. So we still have to collect meters, and we still have to get some kind of information, and I would certainly strongly recommend getting some kind of user and document level data to make sure that we are profitable. But that doesn't affect how we bill the customer. We also need to allow for additional services to be layered onto the seat within that one bill. So that's certainly a consideration for anyone that's doing managed IT today or is looking to do managed IT, is to figure out a way that they can build addendums into their initial contract to be able to offer other services. And that's going to make it easier for the customer to be able to make a decision on getting those additional services, and make it easier to get the sales reps paid on trying to push those additional services. The other thing this allows us to do is cut billing administration time down dramatically. So Print Audit, like everyone on this call, has to do billing, and I know that the administration of doing that can be very complicated for a lot of people. In our case, because we are also a subscription-based company, we have a fixed amount which goes out every month. We don't have to generate complicated invoices for for anything even under our model. So we know that it works personally from first-hand experience. The only other consideration is looking at your ERP and making sure that it's ready for seat-based billing. In other words, does it have the customization available to make sure that you can bill in a different way than cost per page or by cartridge? And so if it doesn't, that's a conversation you're going to have with your ERP provider to make sure that they come up with some way to customize the ability to do seat-based billing through that platform as well. I know for a fact, working with different providers of ERP software, that some natively have the ability to do that, to build in SPB components or other seat-based methodologies, and others don't. So you might have to get creative on how you actually do that. So make sure you get in touch with whoever's providing that information to be able to get what you need, right? Now the hard part, actually building the seat price. And I would imagine that a lot of people in the call have been thinking, okay, this is great. I know how to build a cost per page. I've been doing that for 10 to 15 years. But a seat price there's just too many dangers, lots of red flags coming up, right? And I would argue that that's true, because if you're getting a fixed monthly rate, there's a lot of different things or new things that can go wrong, to affect your profitability, right? So whenever, I guess the base thing is to remember is that whenever we're trying to build a seat price, that the device information that we're collecting through remote monitoring is no longer enough. That it is an absolute requirement that you need user and document data to help you make decisions on how you build those prices, right? Because rules-based printing is a critical part of how you actually reduce the customer spend. And in a seat-based program, hopefully people have picked up on this already, under a seat-based program, that any savings that you can generate in that account now under a seat price goes directly to profitability. In other words, you're going to be inspired to actually find new ways to make that customer more efficient, because everything is a cost item now. It's not a revenue item, it's a cost item. So you're going to try and find ways to, further reduce that internally. So you're going to start using, rules. And what you need to understand when you start thinking of rules is, what are the people doing it, and what kinds of things are they doing? I'll just give you a quick example. If I put a color rule in place that says, I can reduce email spend on color because I can actually force that to be black and white, do people really need a blue hyperlink or a color logo in an email? I don't think they do. And so we're going to put a rule in place to stop that from happening. Now the question is, how much of the customer's current spend in color is being done in email? And unless you're using some kind of user, and document level software to be able to monitor that, it's impossible to have any idea. So if you're going to build a seat price which saves a customer, let's say, 20% of their spend because you've, reduced their email color and their waste print, you really need to understand what portion of their color is going to allow you to do that. Not take a guess, not ask them for their opinion, but really understand what kind of color printing they're doing and where they're doing it. And the good news is, obviously, you can do assessments with user and document-based remote monitoring tools like print audits. We're certainly not the only one in the world that does this. We think we're the best. But there are tools to be able to do that. And the key is to make sure that you're actually including it in your assessment process. So a lot of people will sell solutions that do secure release and embedded solutions to help customers out, but they typically don't use them in the assessment process. And that's something you're going to have to figure out, because when you do the assessment and go to the customer to talk about the savings and the workflow efficiencies that you can bring, you really need to understand what the component breakdowns are on that. So similarly, you'd never do a cost per page price without understanding what their volumes are. You can never do a seat-based price without knowing what their document production looks like. So you've got to get a real strong handle on that. And additional things, this is certainly one, consideration, is that I kind of use the example of whenever we're looking at a page, it's very nearsighted, right? So we're looking at the page and the detail that's on it and how we can make money on it. And it's only until we lift our eyes off of that page and look up around the office that we start seeing other things. What are users doing? And certainly I've seen a lot of this, and I've ignored a lot of this doing traditional managed print assessments, where I walk through the office looking specifically for printers and multifunction devices. But they have a whole bunch of things that they, on a regular basis, are either doing internally, currently outsourcing, or looking to outsource. And that includes, obviously, business process optimization, paperless initiatives that they may have going on, any managed IT for their desktops and servers, etc. Telephony is another huge one, and a growing one is cloud services, right? So how they can securely and safely and economically, start moving parts of their infrastructure, into the cloud. And these are all kinds of things that you can actually layer onto the seat. Once you start looking up and you look at a user, that user has a whole bunch of needs far beyond printing, which we can take care of. And obviously, I'm not saying that's easy. In some cases, people have tried to do managed IT services and failed. Others have succeeded wildly. So as far as the diversification options that are available, either through partnership, acquisition, or building them yourselves, the world's your oyster. But just like we said in the early days of managed print, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not an experiment. You can't do it part-time. If you actually are going to start offering some of these additional services, that you really can't just put a toe in the water, that you've got to go all in and make sure that it matters for your, for your actual business. But the beauty is, once you decide what those things are, you can start adding them onto that seat price on a regular basis. So if you're getting, let's just say, for example, for a customer, you're getting $14 a month for their managed print services, per user, and that you can go in and actually do a document capture and routing solution for another $1.50 per user per month, which you're simply going to, stack onto that seat price. You may go back the next quarter and start talking about how they're doing their document management. So if they don't have a current system in place other than just storing and archiving, then you can help them, with ways to actually be able to tag all of the information and make it more searchable and more accessible for the customers. And let's say, just for example, you're going to charge them $2 per user per month to do that. So each quarter now you've got this ability to, start looking at additional services, building expertise on what you think those are going to be, and then start layering them onto the seat. It's much easier to go after existing customers for additional revenue than it is to actually go after net new logos, right? So the big thing about seat-based billing that I probably like as an entrepreneur the most is that, rules, things that used to scare me because it would actually reduce my revenue, now get me excited. And some of those things are like moving high-cost pages to lower-cost devices, for example, right? So if I'm making, more color in a particular device versus a lower-cost, device I have in the office, I'm kind of reticent to move that over. Conversion of color to monochrome where possible is hardly ever done because, again, it cuts into my, color revenue. And if I'm selling paper, I'm certainly not interested in increasing duplex today because I make revenue on that paper. And if they print single-sided, I get a lot more paper. And any waste or abandoned pages, through the assessments I've done, I've seen a reduction typically of anywhere from 20 to 25% reduction in total page volumes once people put a secure release solution on their MFDs in the in the office, right? And that's massive. That's a big hit for revenue. But under a seat-based model, all of these rules now, once we establish the seat price with the customer, are driving towards additional profit for us as the dealer. So the way that this works is obviously as you build a seat price, you're going to make sure that obviously the customer gets significant savings. I think the sweet spot for decision making is typically around between 15 and 20%. You're going to make sure that they get something in that neighborhood. But at the same time, when you go through the way that you can do that with rules, you might discover that the total ability that you have to save in that account is more like 30%. So if you're offering 15 to 20% for the customer, and because of the solution set that you're offering that you keep 5 to 10% of that, they would be spending 100% of it otherwise. So you get to keep some, and that's a different mentality where you have to start looking at what I give to the customer versus what I keep for being able to enable those kind of savings, right? But that's done in any other program that's offering seat-based billing or other, subscription-based services today, right? It's absolutely normal. When we switch our thinking from, a device to a user, there's a couple of other things that we really need to consider. One is revenue per user. So today we typically look at it as revenue per device, and that's not going to change. None of this requires anyone to throw the, the baby out with the bathwater, right? So the same way that you currently, build your quotes and build your assessments, understanding where the current customer spend is, you'll continue to do that. The only difference is you're actually going to take that total number and you're going to divide that by the number of users who are actively printing. And I say the users that are actively printing, this is a really important note to think about, is that you need an understanding of which people in a given month are actually, printing. So I did an assessment for Toyota in Canada, and obviously Toyota makes cars, so they have a lot of people on the production floor that are making cars and not in the offices, and they don't do any printing whatsoever. So I couldn't simply go by the employee headcount at that location to be able to do a seat-based price on, managed print services. That being said, software like ours actually allows you to do a seat-based billing report every month, which shows you the active users, in other words, who have printed one or more pages, in a certain period to make sure that that's who you're billing for, right? The other thing you need to start looking at is your gross profit per user. So if we're going to start looking at revenue declines per user, we also need to start looking at gross profit per user to either make sure that they are what we have today or are growing depending on the kind of solution sets that we're putting in place. One way to do that, like obviously we're not going to explain the rest of it in this call. I know there are some people on the call that have already taken through our calculator, so we've actually created the seat-based billing calculator which helps you to do that. And it's really important because it helps you get your head around how to go from pricing and building quotes based on cost per page, to building one that is actually based on a seat and understanding that it's going to be profitable. That's the, really the key element, right? The other thing that we have, which you can certainly get from us, is what we call the Essential Guide to Seat-Based Billing, and that is a primer that we created, which has a lot of the, the gotchas and the scary things about seat-based billing, or things that you would perceive to be scary, and actually dispels a lot of those illusions and shows you how to deal with, some of the different things that are involved with doing seat-based billing versus cost per page, and to be able to build a profitable, seat-based price. And last week, I think everyone probably saw the big news where Clover Imaging Group actually announced that they are going to be launching a seat-based billing program for managed print. So if you think that there's too many risks involved with building your own seat price, if you just can't be bothered, then Clover Imaging Group and some others, which will soon be doing some programs as well, are going to be important for you to partner with them and talk about their programs. What they're doing essentially is they're offering you a grade A service on seat-based billing, like a unified billing platform, at a wholesale price. So they will help you with the assessment, they will help you understand what's going on in the customer environment, and they will give you a flat seat-based price as a wholesale price. So you have no risk on, anything else that goes on in that account, right? So you can simply mark it up and, make your profit. And certainly depending on the type of company culture that you have, they're both going to be good options. One, either building it yourself or working with a partner like Clover Imaging Group, just to simply get a wholesale price. The other thing that it should tell everyone on this call when you look at the press release that came from Clover Imaging Group is that it's official. Seat-based billing is no longer just a talking point. It's an actual thing which is going to have a huge impact on our industry. People are actually doing this now. People are investing time and resources to make sure that they have seat-based billing options available. So that's kind of scary and it's kind of exciting, but the day of talking about unified billing, and in our case seat-based billing, is gone, and the day of action is certainly upon us now. Here's just a little sample from the calculator that we did, and what it does very clearly for you is it shows on the left you can see the customer savings. And in this particular example, it was a savings of 19, almost 20%. And yet at the same time, for the dealer, the total gross profit in the account was actually increased by almost 6.5%. And this is the kinds of things that the calculator allows you to look at. So as you take all the different cost elements and you start looking at how you want to build them and what kind of rules you want to do to be able to drive certain efficiencies, then you can build this out and understand it long before you ever give the price. And this is really important because, well, actually, I'll correct that. If you're working with someone like Clover Imaging, where you're actually getting a wholesale seat price, then yes, you're going to have a fixed price which you'll understand for that particular customer. But the one thing you can't do, and actually in any situation you can't do this, is to offer kind of a price book on seat-based billing. So if you have 5 users, you'll pay us $14 a seat. If you have 10 users, that goes down to $13.95. It's impossible. The variations that we've seen in the cost per user for print organizations, ranges dramatically, and there's certainly people with more expertise than I to talk about what those ranges are, but they're very dramatic. So the only way to really generate a safe seat price is to do an assessment and make sure that you're doing it every time, right? And using a calculator like the one that we've built, or if you decide to build your own or use a wholesale option from the likes of Clover Imaging Group, that you understand exactly how your gross profit is impacted, and while at the same time the customer is saving money, right? And that's still one of the huge things that we have to keep in mind, is that yes, people do managed print services because they're looking to reduce complexity. Yes, they do it because they want to have someone sort of manage something that's taking up too much of their time. But at the end of the day, if there's not some kind of savings generated with that from a fiscal perspective, they generally don't have the time to be interested. So it's really important to use a calculator like this to figure out what that looks like for you. And as I said earlier, really just continually look ways to layer the seat. Quarterly reviews today, I know everyone, it's difficult to do quarterly reviews, and I've worked with people trying to come up with those presentations on a quarterly basis, and if they're done manually, they can be very difficult. And typically, the sales process internally, is also difficult on a quarterly basis because you're going and trying to additionally sell something. But the thing I love about addendums and layering the seat is that it's kind of a by-the-way sale. It's not a whole new cycle. You're saying, oh, by the way, we can actually offer you additional savings by looking at your IT infrastructure. We've done an assessment which shows us that you're spending this on your support needs internally. If you work with us and outsource that, we'll simply add another $3 to the seat price per user per month. And so it becomes a different kind of selling conversation, a much more, by the way, or what I like to call side door selling, versus a whole new, sales cycle. So what happens next? First of all, thanks everyone for taking the time to go through that. Hopefully I've clarified more things than I've raised for questions. But one of the clear benefits, obviously, is that compensation for the reps becomes much simpler and more effective. The other thing is that we simplify how the customer buys from us, and we make sure that they have one way to buy from us instead of even 3 different things that they have to think about and learn about. Billing cost per page was obviously a phenomenal thing for us as we tried to move away from the competitive pressures that were going from commodity-based cartridge sales. But it is 15 years later, and we need to look at something that helps us look past the page to continue to grow, and certainly seat-based billing does that. Seat-based billing also allows us to explore these additional revenues and things that we can start to layer onto the seat, looking at our sales cycle in a far different way, and obviously giving us more opportunities to grow revenue as the market either stabilizes or contracts. And seat-based billing allows for us to actually save the customer money while at the same time increasing the amount of profit, the total profit that we make in an account. And that's really important because we probably don't save the customers as much money as we could today, because any direct revenue hit obviously affects how much money we make as an organization. So it's much better to be able to do that. For next step, I would certainly recommend that you meet internally with other key stakeholders of your organization that work on both your product diversification and your billing to figure out if this is something that you want to actually pursue, or if you think it's just a bright shiny object and you want to continue just getting better cost per page, right? The document that I said, the actual seat-based billing document that we did, which you can get from us, the Essential Guide to Seat-Based Billing, does go through a lot of the advantages and disadvantages, both of them, to make sure that you can make that decision internally, right? And the other thing you want to do is, if you do decide that you're going to do some kind of unified billing platform, either seat-based, which is our preference, or device-based, which is some of the preference of the OEMs, is that you start looking at other things that you can layer onto that seat and seeing if you have the stomach or the wherewithal to be able to start adding additional layers of expertise to your organization, either through acquisition or or doing it organically. The third thing you can do, obviously, is contact Print Audit. Get the guide from us. Let us walk you through what the calculator looks like. That doesn't cost you anything, and certainly doesn't require you to be a Print Audit customer. But we certainly love you to have a look at it so that you get a comprehension and understanding of how you can actually take a revenue loss and convert that into increased profits. Because it's very real, it's actually very easy to do, and it's why a lot of people are starting to, actually offer seat-based billing now versus just talking about it, right? So my contact details are there. I've got my email if you need to get me there. I love talking on the phone, so you've got my phone number, there as well. So maybe what we'll do is take some time now to open it up for some questions. So Ange, I'm not sure if you're there.
I am here. Can you guys hear me?
You betcha.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. We do have a few questions. The first one is from Clinton, and it is a little bit long, so bear with me.
Yeah.
If you audit a client and find out what estimated volumes they produce in a year, how do you cost/structure the SBB model if you plan to reduce their volumes? As well, do you base the price on their estimated volumes and what you save in the environment?
Yeah, so the first question, let me see if I got it right, and hopefully I do, is that when you're building the price based on whatever you think their yearly, cost is, that obviously there's a couple easy ways to do that, and I do this all the time in my own assessment-based practice. One is anything that's contracted currently, so if it's, copiers or other devices that they have under lease, that's fairly easy because we understand what those volumes are and what they're paying on a monthly basis. Also, customers that are already currently engaged in a cost per page program, either with us or with somebody else for the print portion of their environment, that's another very easy thing for us to understand what their volumes look like for the previous year. And that's what we would use to, sort of build the baseline of the price. What we do today is that we simply take those numbers and we work it into a new cost per page quote, for the customer based on what we know about, with 100% accuracy what their yearly, spend was, right? The only difference is that we will actually take that amount and we'll create a total amount for the year. So instead of by device or by page, we'll make a total amount multiplying the volumes that we know by the price that we know we would offer in our cost per page program, and then simply divide that by the number of active printers that they know how they have in the environment. Situation 2 is less ideal, and that's a situation where we have to do a 30-day assessment, for a customer where we know nothing about them, they don't have anything under contract, etc., right? And that's very difficult, but just like we do with cost per page, we put addendums in place, some contract clarifications that state that we have the right to revisit that price should there be, any large anomalies in the assessment process. And that does happen. You build a quote saying you're going to do it for $14 per user per month, only to realize that it's a school and you were doing a slow period for them for the assessment. Maybe in September those numbers dramatically change, and when you look at the total volumes for the year, that it's actually about 20% different than what you thought it was. So the easiest way to deal with that with the customer is to have that conversation up front, saying, given your vertical and given the, information we have, we've done our best to build a seat price base, for you based on what we know, but should that change, that there could be a variance, once we've analyzed the volumes in September, kind of et cetera, right? So that's just good housekeeping, making sure that you have contract language around that and that you're actually having that conversation with the customer, before they sign the contract. And can you read the second part of that again, Ange?
Do you base the price on their estimated volumes and what you save in the environment?
So do you base it on estimated volumes? I think we talked about that a little bit. And do you base it on what you can save in the environment? Yeah, you do base it on what you can save in the environment. But again, remember, we're not going to, give the customer 100% of those savings back. So what we do in our calculator, at least, is we use the calculator to figure out the total that we can save by incorporating rules and savings. And then we, sit around and figure out how much of that we actually want to keep, right? So, what's fair? Is it fair to give a customer, 15% savings, and in return you increase your total gross profit for 5%? I'd say that's fair, but someone else might think, well, no, I want more than that. So, maybe it's 10% customer savings and I get to keep, closer to 7%, increase in my gross profit. So you'll have to determine what that is. But at the end of the day, the savings, although they do become a reduction in spend for the customer, that it's absolutely paramount that you actually start, building in either GP protection or, improvements, right?
Okay, great. And Clinton, if we didn't answer your question, please feel free to reach out to us via the contact information that's on the screen there.
Absolutely.
The next question is from Bob. Is eAutomate 8.7, which allows contracts with item instead of equipment, compatible with SBB?
I'm not really sure. My understanding of that component is that as an item, yeah, I don't really know. I can't answer that honestly, but you can certainly pick up the phone and, give your eAutomate contact a call. I would think that they have something there, but I'm not 100% sure. I do know that with systems that are using SAP or other systems that deal traditionally in the managed IT world, that they have natural components for those seat-based options, but you'll have to contact eAutomate directly.
Okay, thanks, West. Another question from Jeff. Can you show us an example of full-page build-out on pricing out a deal?
I absolutely can. And so what I encourage you to do is make sure you've got my email there, or you can contact us, through just going to Print Audit. But certainly my email's right there, so is my phone number. I would encourage. I'll take the time. I'll take a 30-minute to a 40-minute session, and I'll walk you through it personally. There are some, some things which are hard to understand if I just send you the, the actual spreadsheet. But once you move through it, once we explain some things, then you have that aha moment. So, yeah, reach out to me. Let's do a private session.
Okay, great. The next question I can answer, will there be a link to the recorded seminar afterwards? Pam, yes, there will be. Everyone that registered will receive an email with the webinar recording either later this afternoon or tomorrow. Another question from Greg. Do you think SBB helps make the move into IT services? If so, how?
Yeah, I do think it helps make the move into IT services, and the reason being that once you start to bill, manage print as a seat-based price, you're going to start looking for other things you can throw onto that, and the natural thing is managed IT services, right? It seems to be a very natural progression. If you think about it, a printer is just another, network element that customers are having to deal with on a daily basis. They don't have the same distinction between a printer and a desktop computer as we do. So it will certainly help you to do that launch. Once you understand the complexities of building a seat-based price for a printer, which is, obviously a little bit different than, other network elements like switches and desktop computers and other things, that it's going to put you in a natural place to be able to start, making each step of adding things that much easier, right? Traditionally, the way I've seen it today in most dealerships is that they will have a managed print practice on one side in which they're charging cost per page, and then for their managed IT, business, they'll have the seat-based billing on the other side, and neither group talks to each other. So I think that needs to change, and I would certainly say that by starting with, what you already have expertise in, which is managed print, that that you can add these other things. The other thing that you can do once you start offering seat-based billing for managing print is that you can start going into your competitors' accounts and actually start providing a monthly subscription program to actually manage your competitors' pages. So if a customer can't talk to you for 2 years because they're under contract for CPP, under a seat-based program, that doesn't matter. You can simply charge them a smaller seat price for lowering their costs and putting rules in place for those competitive devices, and then take all the business over in 2 years when when it comes time for renewal, right? So instead of just waiting for 2 years, why not get some money today? And seat-based billing will allow you to do that, and then start layering other things on that, so the customer will be, essentially in a very desirous position to do more seat-based billing stuff with you down the road.
Thanks, West. We have another question from Chris. It says, hey, West, would you imagine that SBB or flat rate contracts would have a volume ceiling / max volume at a safeguard for VARs?
Yes. So we actually do in the Essential Guide to Seat-Based Billing, we have a section on that, and certainly you want to have some contract language built in. I saw another interesting thing, actually, when I was in Australia. I was speaking with some people there, and they were talking about how Telstra does it, and they actually have a section of their contract for the telco, which is called a fair use policy or fair play, policy, right? And, in their world with cell phones, if they have an unlimited data plan, for example, which they do in Australia, that there's a potential for abuse by people, kind of opening up a hotspot and trying to monetize it either deliberately or just by sharing it with, too many people in the family, right? And as we all know, that's going to make the data, use go, through the moon. So in their contract, they actually have a fair play policy, which stipulates very clearly up front that you're not allowed to do that stuff, that it's really built for your personal use, and if you start, offering an internet cafe with 10 connections, that, it no longer applies. Similarly, we can do the same thing with volume, saying to the best of our ability, it is based on this volume, and we'll give you a plus or minus, sort of ceiling on that, whatever that looks like. Please don't bring outsourced print in-house now that you're getting a flat rate, seat price, or by all means do, just let us know so we can actually, modify your seat price for you to bring you more value. For volumes that are on unmanaged devices, and you're currently still paying cost per page for those devices, please don't move those over to our devices, because we are going to monitor for that. Print Audit actually has reporting for that, so we let you know if unmanaged volumes start migrating to managed devices under the seat-based program, as well as reports to let you know if there's any increases, and alerts as well if there's any dramatic increases in total volumes. So take care of that with both contract language and an upfront and frank conversation with the customer.
Great. Thank you, Wes. That appears to be all the questions that we have for now.
Great. Well, it looks like we're right on the money, so it is a couple minutes after 2. First of all, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to go through this today. Again, if there's any further questions, we're at your service. Our contact information is there. If anyone would like a copy of the seat-based billing calculator, you can download it. Or sorry, if they want a copy of the Essential Guide to Seat-Based Billing, you can download that at printaudit.com/SBB. And for anyone that wants sessions to go through the calculator, certainly I'm at your service, and you can email me at wmcdonald@printaudit.com. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and happy selling.